Going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today for this very special event. As the Chinese Communist Party's aggressive tactics, and particularly their defense of human rights atrocities, have continued to come into the spotlight on the world stage, we want to discuss today what can be done to address the level of malign influence on the Islamic world and the implications that the Uyghur Genocide in particular has for Muslim countries. We're very pleased to be celebrating the release of a new book, Menace, China's Colonization of the Islamic World and Uyghur Genocide by Mr. Abdulhakim Idris, who is here with us today for the event, and to be joined by our other prestigious panelists. With us today, we have Ambassador Andrew Brimberg, Mr. Dolken Issa, Mr. Nihad Awad, and myself, Julie Millsap of the Campaign for Uyghurs. We're very honored to be co-hosting this event with the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation and grateful to each of you for coming today to share your insights on these topics. I'd like to start by introducing our first speaker today, Ambassador Andrew Brimberg, who is the President and CEO of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Previously, Ambassador Brimberg served as the representative of the United States to the Office of the United Nations and other international organizations in Geneva. Ambassador Brimberg has a long history of public service. Prior to his work at the UN, he served as Assistant to the President and Director of the Domestic Policy Council for the Executive Office of the President. He previously served as Policy Advisor and Counsel on nominations for the Office of Senate Majority Leader. He also worked for the nonprofit Mitra Corporation, as a Senior Health Policy Analyst and Department Manager and for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Ambassador Brimberg earned a BA from Franciscan University of Steubenville in Ohio and a JD from Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. He lives in Virginia with his family, and we are very, very honored to have him here to contribute to our discussion today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Ambassador Brimberg.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to join you all and speak today. This is a really important topic, and I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists their keen insights. Dolken, it's good to see you again. We last met when we were both in Geneva. So as you mentioned, I've just returned from Geneva, and I'll be reflecting upon some of my experiences as it directly relates to this. But I just want to open up with a little bit of a preface that I know many of us are already aware of, but I want to put a little different spin on it, which is I know we are discussing a devastating topic today, the ongoing Uyghur genocide taking place in China. But I want to start with a hopeful message. Progress is being made. If we go back and look where this conversation was, where this crisis stood in terms of public awareness and government willingness to even discuss this over the last year or 2 years, we have made tremendous progress. And I believe that in the not too distant future, we are reaching some sort of critical tipping point where we will see even bigger impacts and changes made. So I think that's an important thing for all of us to keep in mind. That this can be brutal and devastating to focus on and be downtrodden and not seeing the changes that need to take place. But I do think it's important to keep in mind that we are advancing towards this goal. And I just want to talk about that just in less than the last year. Much of the world is now much more aware of the ongoing genocide taking place by the Chinese Communist Party against Uyghur Muslims and other minorities. These heinous human rights violations and human rights abuses of incarceration of millions, of forced sterilizations, and of forcing individuals into modern day slavery are becoming more broadly broadcast across, not just in the United States, but in other countries around the world. We at Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation are very proud of the work of Dr. Adrian Zenz, who's been our senior China fellow here just in the last year. Which all of you are aware, I know, but his groundbreaking report in December 2020 that really led to the U.S. government's actions on a total ban on cotton and tomatoes coming in from Xinjiang. His research, as well as others, helped support the genocide determination made by Secretary Pompeo just back in January, which we've now seen Secretary Blinken reaffirm this ongoing genocide determination. This helps, I think, show domestically and around the world that there is a very strong and continuing bipartisan stand against these CCP activities that are going on, and this is not going to go away. In addition to this greater awareness, the banning of certain products and the genocide determination, we need to continue to push for banning more, and other governments need to follow suit and take more actions to ban not just those activities, but others. There's a large conversation happening around sanctions by other countries in response to some of the recent actions taken by China. And specifically, we need to continue to focus on the issues of supply chain implications of all sorts of products and services that have any roots coming out of Xinjiang. And to that end, we continue to work with those here in Washington, around the country, to push for the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, and are encouraging those in other countries to do similar legislation to help strengthen this message about that the continuing actions by China are unacceptable. One thing I want to just talk about from my experience, so that's kind of my preface. I want to talk about my experience in Geneva working with other country delegations, particularly as implicated in our topic today around BRI and other developing countries that have really been, from I think many people's perspectives, the real open question, the kind of missing element to much of this international and diplomatic dialogue and debate. So again, if we look at how the US and a couple other countries led in the UN and other multilateral fora, both in New York and Geneva, over the last 2 years, we see a pretty steady, sometimes slow, but steady drumbeat in an ever increasing number of countries willing to join letters, participate in side events, make joint statements on this issue. And I'll just share from my personal experience, working with other partners in like-minded countries, we constantly had the same question that we would kind of go around our conversation as we were trying to get more countries to sign on and step up, which would be, who's going to be the first majority Muslim country to break out, to join us in these efforts? That it took time, and we're not 100% there yet, but to get more like-minded countries, particularly more developed Western countries, all on the same page, that was making progress. But we all knew, when will there be the first Muslim majority country to join us? And that every time we would do a letter or a side event or a statement, we knew China would be right behind us with their own letter, that they were going to have mostly, or if not mostly, a huge contingent of Muslim majority countries signing letters saying, oh, we think everything's fine. And I hope this doesn't come as a surprise, but myself and other diplomats found this very troubling, and we engaged with the ambassadors and representatives of many or all of those countries during my tenure, and I know others have as well, and we had very frank conversations, and it became very, very clear that two things became very clear. One, which was the first concern, was actually, they're not stupid. That was my first concern. My first concern was, have they been duped? Do they actually believe that there's nothing going on? Because if that's the case, that's a real challenge we need to fix. And that, to me, was actually the more positive one, that in few cases, after we would discuss for more than a minute or two, representatives from other governments kind of sat back and acknowledged, okay, we know, but they would then go through their justifications and issues around signing letters or being forced to sign letters and all of this. So that was an important context, I felt, to make sure that everyone understood what's the challenge we face. And this kind of brings us, I think, now more squarely to the topic we're going to discuss now, and I'd look forward to hearing about what's in the book, is that the particular way that the CCP has sought to influence, for outside political purposes, the use of their BRI and other development and investment relationships with developing countries, including Muslim majority, but across the entire BRI network. And the way they've done so, I have to say, very effectively, to tie their continued aid, support, and cooperation to political alignment with the regime on a multitude of issues, One specifically absolutely is around their defensive posture on issues related to Xinjiang and the ongoing genocide. But it wasn't exclusive to that. We saw it in other multilateral and UN activities where China would use that as a enticement or a threat over the heads of other countries to get them to either join them or refrain from criticizing on other issues as well. But I think perhaps in my experience there, one of the most pervasive was around the issues of Xinjiang. Obviously, in Geneva, you have the Human Rights Council, you have the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who I'm happy, I feel fine saying I spoke with many times about the ongoing genocide in Xinjiang. And while I think over the course of the last year, we can objectively see there has been some, maybe minimal progress made by that office in speaking about this issue, it is completely insufficient. And in my mind, is probably the single greatest failure of that office happening today or any time over the course of the last year has been its virtual silence and capitulating to how China has sought to frame the issue. So I think, coming back to the BRI context for a moment, and I'm going to keep my comments very, very brief because I want to make sure we have time for questions at the end, is that I think when we look at it from a U.S. perspective, one challenge we faced repeatedly was that these countries did not want, in many cases, to sign up for these debt trap agreements or different arrangements that were being offered by the Chinese, but felt compelled from a development perspective that they needed the resources. And I can share, I had some very interesting diplomatic conversations with many of my colleagues. The most interesting one was when another ambassador from a developing country whose country is not involved in BRI, basically chastised a fellow ambassador saying, you're basically selling your sovereignty for cheap. And it's a terrible mistake, and we won't do it, and you shouldn't be doing it either. So I thought that was very interesting to see that cross diplomatic dialogue going on. But it really brought home an important point for us from a U.S. policymaking perspective, which is just as there's been, which is very important, good to see, this bipartisan consensus around fighting back against this terrible genocide. There's also been a bipartisan consensus that the U.S. needs to strengthen its international development role. And we've seen important actions just over the course of the last year around increased outreach by USAID, the complete, the modernization of the Export-Import Bank, and in terms of changing some of the policies enabled there. And then most significantly, basically the completely rewriting and creation of the Development Finance Corporation that has billions of dollars of development aid available that we're going to be looking at strategically putting into place to directly counteract much of this BRI outreach, which hopefully will not just enable these other countries to preserve their own sovereignty, to develop in a more holistic and consistent way without debt traps and all of this, but also equally as importantly as it relates to this topic, to be freed of the type of political threats and intimidation that keeps these countries from being able to speak the truth. So as I said, I wanted to be brief. I look forward to the questions as we go through, and I'll stop for now.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Brimberg, for those remarks. Incredibly insightful. I'm sure this is going to spark a lot of questions towards the end of our time. So just to remind everyone and reset again, if you do have questions that come up as our esteemed panelists are making their remarks, you are welcome to share those in the chat. We will be saving those for the end of our time, or you can use the raise hand function as we come to the question and answer session. With that, I would like to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Nihad Awad, the Executive Director and co-founder of the Council on American Islamic Relations, known as CAIR, which is the largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization in the United States. He has served on the Civil Rights Advisory Panel to the White House Commission on Aviation Safety and Security, among many other prestigious positions, and in 2001 has testified before both houses of the U.S. Congress on issues concerning the Muslim community. He's widely recognized as being one of the world's most influential Muslim leaders and is cited annually in the Arabian Business Power 100 and the world's 500 most influential Muslims list. He is considered an authoritative voice for Muslim issues and is frequently interviewed on national and international media such as CNN, BBC, PBS, and many, many more. In addition to his position at CARE, he is also a passionate community organizer and works often with leaders and organizations to promote positive relations among people of diverse faith communities. In 2021, he was named one of Washington's most influential people in civil rights and criminal justice by the Washingtonian. And we are very, very privileged to have him here with us today to share his perspective on what's happening. Without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce Mr. Nihad Awad.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone, and Assalamu alaikum, and Ramadan Mubarak to those who are observing the holy month of the fasting, the month of Ramadan. It's really a great honor and privilege for me to be invited and to be in the presence of such esteemed leaders and activists and thought leaders who have been inspiring all of us to pay attention to one of the most important issues of human rights and dignity that unfortunately has been ignored by the world community for so long. So I'm deeply honored that you consider me to be one of those voices to be invited to speak to you. The issue of the Uyghur Muslims is very dear and near to our hearts as Muslims, as Americans, as global citizens. I myself, I am a Palestinian refugee. Not many people know this. And I know what it means to be at the receiving end, to be at the receiving end of the injustice of a very powerful force. The Muslims in China in general have been under the brutal grip of power by the government, and the Uyghur Muslims and other Turkic ethnicities have been also persecuted by the Chinese government. We at CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, we have been vocal for many years. In fact, one of the criticism that I received from some community members a few years ago when I wrote to the leader of China about 6 years ago, they told me, who are you? Who are you to communicate with the leader of China? I told them, I'm Nihad Awad. I represent Muslims. I represent the voiceless of millions of people. And why not? Yeah, I'm not as powerful as China. And we're not, but we are on the right side of history. And I have to do my part to voice my opinion because my voice counts. And that's why I'm willing to do all I can as an individual and as an organization to raise our objection to any injustice anywhere. We're always reminded by the beautiful saying of Martin Luther King Jr., an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this injustice that has been befalling our brothers and sisters, the Uyghur Muslims, this is an injustice against all of us. I want you to know we feel it. I'm so proudly displaying the flag behind me. Ever since I took it from the rally in front of the Chinese embassy, I'm so honored to have it. And I would like all people to see that this is now a flag that will stay with me until we see the liberation and the lifting of this oppressive and brutal measures against our brothers and sisters in the region. Now, I would like you also to zoom out and see where this fit in the global arena of Islamophobia. China has been portraying the Uyghur Muslims in a false light for so many years, but especially after 9/11. It has used the pretext of global terrorism and national security, unfortunately, following the footsteps of the United States when they cracked down on Muslims and applied collective guilt against Muslims. This is an unfortunate reality. It started here at home. And many people took note around the world to go after Muslims and to associate their beautiful religion with violence, with harming innocent people. When in fact, our beautiful religion says the harming and killing of an innocent single life is equivalent to the killing of the entire humanity. And the saving of one human life is equivalent to the saving of entire humanity. Unfortunately, for political reasons, China has been portraying falsely the Uyghur Muslims as a national security threat and has applied against them mass detention and justified concentration camps and denying them basic human and religious rights that you and I and millions of people today are celebrating and living. Today, it's the 7th day of Ramadan. What it means to Uyghur Muslims who are in concentration camps. They cannot practice what I and 2 billion Muslims are practicing today. They're not allowed to fast. They're not allowed to practice their faith. They're not allowed to connect with God. They're not allowed to pray. They're not allowed to even have contacts with their families. So the Chinese government succeeded, unfortunately, to isolate and silence. But now, with your efforts, with all these voices, it shows that China is not and should not get away with murder, literally with murder. And I'm committing to you that as we have been fighting for the rights of Muslims in Myanmar, the Rohingya Muslims, Muslims in Kashmir, Muslims in India, Muslims in Palestine, and have been attending also to the crisis in Syria and Yemen. And we have been witnessing the persecution of Muslims in France, in Europe. The Uyghur Muslims issue is on the top priority of American Muslims and the Muslim world. Now I know that majority Muslim countries are not up to speed and on the same page like their people, and that's an unfortunate reality that the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, is not doing enough to represent the will of their people and to stand by their brothers and sisters in China. I hope that they will have the 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 backbone to stand up for their people. But what I can say to the OIC and the United States and many governments, the Uyghur Muslims should not be used as a trade bargaining chip. This is not just about economic sanctions. It is one of the tools to put pressure, but we should not allow the Uyghur Muslims to be used as a bargaining chip. It is a moral issue above all. If we stand for what's right, we really have to hold China accountable, no matter how economically China is powerful. And we have to apply the sanctions, the moral sanctions, the political sanctions, and yes, hurt them in the pocket where it hurts. So I tell my brothers and sisters globally, you have to be active. You have to raise your voice. You have to be a community organizer. In fact, it starts with you. It doesn't start with your government. Your government, including the US, will turn a blind eye unless you take the issue as a personal issue and you organize locally and you pass local legislation at the city and state and federal level. That's how politicians pay attention when their constituents care about an issue and express their concern. Then they start to reflect your concern. Start locally, organize. I told my friends in the Uyghur community here, we should go in front of the Chinese embassy on regular basis. It should not just be once in a blue moon. I'm willing to go there on a monthly basis. If you want to organize on a weekly basis, I'm committed. You organize and we will follow. We will follow your leadership on that. So local organizing is the key. And as you organize, raise awareness, do panel discussions like what we're having now. Discuss this issue at the dinner table, at the breaking of the fast table every day. In your prayers, think of your brothers and sisters, the Uyghur Muslims, and what's happening to them. Make their issue your issue. Once we adopt this mindset, we will start to see a breakthrough. And we will see that people care when we ourselves care. And that's very critical. Secondly, when you go shopping, whether on Amazon, which I don't like, or when you go in the stores, you have a choice. Look at the label. Support local economies. And if you see it's made in China, I know it might be cheaper. Do that sacrifice. Turn to another product and make it known. Take a picture and say, I'm not buying this product. Put it on your social media. That's the activism that the global community need to see. When they see us, politicians will start to reflect. And that is really the world consumer population. That's the one that really put pressure and ended apartheid. Governments in the US, in Europe, including Britain, they were reluctant to support the boycott against apartheid South Africa. But when people took to the streets, to the markets, and they put that pressure, then decades later, those afraid and reluctant governments started to reflect the will of the people, and the apartheid regime in Africa had to cease. And I believe that no matter how big China is, if we create this global sense of unity and solidarity with the Uyghur people against the Chinese government, then the economic boycott and sanction will be more effective. To be specific, in the Congress, we are working to pass the legislation against the concentration camps and the Chinese Labor Force Act. That is an important step. So I'm telling you that I'm here to support you. You just let me know how we can help, but rest assured that you have a friend in me, in CARE, and the Muslim community and the global Muslim community.
Thank you so much for those wonderful and very moving remarks and for sharing your perspective with us. Yeah. It is my great privilege to introduce our next panelist following these wonderful remarks, Mr. Dolkun Issa. Dolkun Issa is the president of the World Uyghur Congress and vice president of the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, UNPO. He was the former student leader of pro-democracy demonstrations at Xinjiang University in 1988 and founded the Student Science and Culture Union at the university in 1987, working on programs to eliminate illiteracy, promote science, and lead other students in East Turkestan. He was then dismissed from university. After enduring persecution from the Chinese government, he fled China in 1994 and sought asylum in Europe, becoming a citizen of Germany in 2006. He has since been presenting Uyghur human rights issues to the UN Human Rights Council, European Parliament, European governments, and international human rights organizations. He's worked to mobilize the Uyghur diaspora community to collectively advocate for their rights and the rights of the Uyghurs in East Turkestan. He might be considered indeed the leader of the Uyghur people, and we are very, very privileged to have him with us today. It is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Dolkun Issa.
Well, thank you very much, Julia, for your wonderful introductions. And good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and dear friends. And I would like to thank Victim of Communism Memorial Foundation and the campaign for Uyghur jointly organize this event and inviting me to speak today. It is my honor to meet virtual again Ambassador Brimberg. Yes, we was 2019 in December attending same ceremony, Sakharov Prize was Ilham Tohti, Professor Ilham Tohti in Strasbourg and European Parliament. And 2020 we met again and in the US Ambassador mission in the Geneva. Mr. Ambassador here really helped and support the Uyghur issue during his term. Unfortunately, he left, but however, now I'm use this opportunity congratulations, you are being the president and the victim of the Communism Memorial Foundation. This event is more meaningful to me than other events I have attended. There is two reasons. First, Victim of Communism Memorial Foundation was first organization to recognize my peaceful and freedom struggle to the right Uyghur people. So Victim of Memorial Foundation President Human Rights Award with the ceremony on the Capitol Hill 2016, 30th of March. So this is the award. Can you see this? Yes, I have hang it in my my office all the time. So this is my great privilege. And that time, my name was still on the Interpol red notes. I was still blamed as a terrorist. You know, Chinese government protest, U.S. government, and also Victim of Communism Memorial Foundation to stop this ceremony. Even Chinese embassy personally visit State Department to ask to stop this ceremony, and even ask don't let me to enter United States. But Communism Memorial Foundation give me such an honor that time, and also this is the same days Chinese President Xi Jinping visit DC that time, 30th of March. So that's why I really the Communism Memorial Foundation is for me is very meaningful. And the second reason, my dear brother, friends, colleague, Abdul Hakim's book Menace was published and introduced, and today he will introduce his book and also talking on this. I'm so proud. I'm really proud of my friends. Abdulhakim writes this book and publish in very timely. To be honestly, I haven't yet read this book because I got this book just yesterday. But however, I quick look at the menu today, and I also talked with him contents of this book a couple of days ago, and I can say this book may be first book about the Uyghur genocide. So I'm really proud. My friend, my colleague, writes this book, and why I and Abdul Hakim, we have worked long together, long way, you know, and write for my people. I believe we will be continue fight together. We have still long way. I believe we can success together. I have been activist for the Uyghur right and the freedom more than over the 35 years. I start my human rights activism, Julia already a little bit explained, and in the 1980s when I was a student and leading the student democracy protest in Turkestan. But at that time, I worked together, his wife and the co-founder of the campaign for Uyghurs, my friends Rushan Abbas together at that time. And we formed together Students Cultural Scientists Union in the Xinjiang University. And we advocated the Uyghur right of people. Most of some people thought the Uyghur current genocide, current situation was just start 2016, before no problems the Uyghur. No, this problems exist all the time. When was the students' time? So that's time, and I and Rushan, we took a couple of 1,000 students lead to the street, and we hold a demonstration. And we have negotiation with the Chinese high-level Chinese Communist Party official, demand right of the people, and that's why I was kicked also from the university. That time, quite a lot of my good friends also worried to approach to me. Some of my friends avoid me and afraid because of the Chinese pressure. But however, Russia at that time, and she was very brave, approaching to me and also helped me. You know, after I was kicked also from the university, and we went to the Beijing for the petition office. We don't have money. I'm poor students that time, and Rushan, I never forget it. I mention all the time, and her brother Rishad Abbas, Dr. Rishad Abbas, he give him $100. $100 when he for the summer holiday time visit Turkestan. That time he give. That time Dr. Rishad Abbas studied in New Zealand, and he give $100. This $100 and the Russian give me that time. This is big money that time, $100, and I use that this $100. I made a trip to Beijing. I made some high-level Chinese Communist Party official, and at least we submitted the petition. So we had such an amazing experience. Yeah, 1994, I left my country, and 1996, I came to Germany, and I sought political asylum. I met my brother Abdulhakim, and we formed together 1996 World Uyghur Youth Congress, November 1996. Then that time, no one, who is the Uyghurs, what is the Uyghur? Nearly nobody knows the Uyghur. We start, that time we didn't have no international support and also no financial resource. We are very poor, just new arriving to Germany. We don't have a passport, but we start our activism that time. And we driving to Geneva for attending the Human Rights Council, Human Rights Committee section. And whole the night we're driving. We don't have money, stay in the hotel. We don't have money and stay in the hotel shower. We just drive whole the night and sleeping on the car, washing our face, and in the gas petrol station, we had such a difficult time. That time we worked together this way. And as I remember, 1999, Chinese former President Jiang Zemin visited French time, and Abdulhakim, I, and some other two friends together. Long 1 week we hold the demonstration against Xi Jinping. Jiang Zemin, and in the French and Lyon and the Paris. Yeah, along the 1 week we don't have money to stay in the hotel. 1 week we stay in the nearly 1 week in the car. Stay in the car, and the daily time demonstration, and night time we stay in the car. Well, yeah, but we are thinking this is the really amazing time, and 2005 all the time is Abdulhakim with me. 2005 and 2008, and so far I detained so many country border. 2005. When we was attending to the UN Human Rights Council section in Geneva, I was detained by the Swedish police because of the accusation of the Chinese government. 2005, even Swedish police, Swedish government also they didn't have any knowledge who is the Uyghurs. Just because of the Chinese accusation, I was detained, and Abdulhakim with me together at that time, and I was questioned 6 hours, take my fingerprint. And like I was treated as like terrorist criminal, but 6 hours later I was released. So far I'm detained so many country borders, South Korea 2008 and Rome. But however, before Abdulhakim left from Germany to the United States, all the time he with me together. So that's why. I never forget this. That's why I'm calling my brother, friends, colleague, everything, everything. And now, my two good friends and the couple and the one family and the Rushan and the Abdulhakim. This is another experience for me. So we are close, some friends, close, some relatives. We have such a good relationship with them. Well, as I said, and 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago, also Uyghur cause was not well known. The people, we had a very difficult situation, financial difficulty, and nobody recognized us. We detained. Even 2006, when I was in Washington, I was detained Washington Dallas airport, and I was sent back to Germany. I didn't let enter to Washington as well. But we have never stopped. All right. And finally, I got a visa to the United States. So far, I travel a lot. Even I got Human Rights Prize in the Capitol Hill. This is the things. So, but however, as I say, this atrocities, this genocidal policy, Chinese government was not new issue. 35 years ago, when my students' time was exist, but just the level was different. 35 years ago, 30 years ago, at least we had the right to went to street. We hold a demonstration, and the Chinese Communist Party on the other side of the table. We were the other side of the table. We discuss. We can raise our willingness. At least they listen to us, but no, it is impossible. 2009, same demonstration was happening. Same demonstration was happening, but result is a big difference. 2009, 5th July, Chinese government official saying 197 people were killed. But since 12 years, so many eyewitnesses came to Europe, United States, different countries. We believe more than 1,000 people were killed one night. This is a big difference. 1988, I was under one of my friends, kicked also from the university. This is the highest punishment. But no, particularly since 2014, Xi Jinping, current president China, Xi Jinping talks of power, everything dramatically changed. We have seen, we have witnessed last at least 5-6 years, witness strategy of Chinese government shift from assimilation policy to genocide policy. And so social re-engineering to the Uyghur people, everything make the Uyghur people unique, language, religious, culture has been targeted. Today, at least 3 million innocent Uyghur is a concentration camp, where they are subject to tortures, systematic sexual abuse, forced labor, subject 100,000 Uyghur also, and use the modern slavery, forced labor, mass sterilization, and forced abortion Uyghur women, rape, attack Uyghur culture, religions, and even today, this human rights violation and atrocity happening everywhere around the world. Human rights violation happening every country, even today happening in the United States, Germany, European country. But some people saying, oh, Uyghur human rights violation. It is completely wrong. It is beyond of the human rights violation. Human rights violation exists everywhere, but just different of level. But today, Chinese Communist Party commit genocide against Uyghur. This is the happening for the Turkestan today. It's not happening all the way around the world, just happening in Turkestan today. This is the big difference. So that's why, and separating Uyghur children from the parents, we don't know exact number, maybe more than 500,000 Uyghur children. Separate family and indoctrinate, denounce national ethnic identity, gives them Chinese name. Now today is the second week of the Holy Ramadan. Whole the Muslim 1.5 billion Muslim world peacefully fasting. Any government, any dictatorial government doesn't care who is, at least no forbidden to fasting. But today Uyghur Muslim have been faced, couldn't fasting. Even not fasting, even they couldn't greeting each other, Salam Alaikum. They couldn't saying I'm Muslim. No country, no one, and involve what do you eat. Any dictatorial regime, any authoritarian regime cannot and involve your daily life. What you eat, what you dress, what you speak. But today, Chinese government determine and what do you eat. Even today is the Holy Ramadan time. This year we couldn't get any information what was happening, but 2015, 2016, during the normally Chinese government doesn't care. School children have a food or no food, but particularly Ramadan time, forced to eat and drink, eat food, drink. We can test them. Who refused to eat or drink during the lunchtime, you are fasting and punished. Can you find any other part of the world find such example? It is impossible, you know. And the Salam Alaikum, it is forbidden. Muslim name is forbidden. You cannot give them Ahmed, Mehmet, Aisha such a name to the children today. What do you dress? What do you eat? Forced to eat pork, drinking alcohol. You know, even you are vegetarian or really believer, doesn't care. If your colleague, Chinese colleague, offer you to eat pork, if you refuse, you are terrorist, you are radicalist, immediately put in the concentration camp. This is the most important reason. Yeah. So that's why today, some people saying, well, talking, yeah, 21st century, some countries, some of the part of the world, so many atrocities are going on, but you cannot compare what's going on for the Uyghur people today. 2000, since today is in the information century. You can take mobile, you can call your friends, relative around the world, to Africa, Latin America, around the world, but I haven't accessed my family more than 4 years. My brother Abdul Hakim, he cannot access his family more than 4 years. More than 20, 30 his family members disappears. No news. Same situation with me. Just we got very heartbreaking news. Since 2017, I lost contact with my family member. But first heartbreaking news, I learned from the Chinese media, some of the media, my mother died. This is the first heartbreaking news. She died, she was 78 years old, and a retired woman, she died one of the concentration camp. Because of my mother, because of she is the Uyghurs, ethnicity. Then last year, 2020, I got second heartbreaking news, my father died. I learned this news from the Chinese media, Global Times. Still, I don't have an idea when he was passed away, in the concentration camp, hospital, because of the age, because of health, because of the torture. I don't know, I have no idea. This is the situation today. All the Uyghur who live in exile have the same situation, you know. But unfortunately, this world and the reaction, international reaction is very slow, very slow. This atrocities start 2016, more than 5 years, not single resolution for the Human Rights, United Nations Human Rights Council, not single urgent section happening by the UN Human Rights Council, not single statement was saying by the Secretary General of the United Nations. Look.
You can Q.
Well, okay, maybe I owe my time is past. So that's why it is a time, breaking silence. We thank US government, first country to really take concrete action, and the former administration and the current administration also very involved with this. Finally, European Union also jointly sanctioned Chinese Communist Party high-level official last. This is a good step, but it's not good enough. Not as good enough. Should be transatlantic cooperation must be needed. No, there's a whole world stand together and take concrete action. And this is only way to stop this atrocity. And finally, I congratulate my brother Abdul Hakim. This book, I'm really proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dolglen, for sharing with us that very intriguing backstory. We're very honored to have you join us today. I'd like to also take a moment and acknowledge, I did see that we had a special guest join us, and so I just wanted to mention, I saw that we had Mr. Abdul Malik Mujahid join us on the call, and someone who's been very, very vocal from the Muslim world on the Uyghur issue for the past several years. So just wanted to take a quick moment and say thank you so much for joining us before I move to introducing Mr. Abdulhakim Idris, the author of a book which we are highlighting in discussion today, which really does a fantastic job of highlighting this crisis. And to give some background, Mr. Abdulhakim Idris was born in Khotan city in East Turkestan and was educated in Islamic religious studies and Arabic language at the underground Islamic schools in Khotan before leaving his hometown in 1986 to study Islam in Egypt's Al-Azhar University. After he graduated from Cairo, he settled in Munich, Germany in 1991 as one of the first Uyghurs to seek asylum in Europe. Mr. Idris has consistently advocated for the rights of the Uyghur people and has been a prominent human rights advocate in the Uyghur diaspora. He also actively raised awareness on Communist China's brutal human rights abuses against the Uyghur people and has done so for many years. He moved to the United States in 2009 and currently lives in Northern Virginia with his wife and 2 sons. He speaks fluent English, German, Turkish, Arabic, and Uyghur, and his expertise and writing this book and the hard work that went into it is something that we are certainly looking forward to hearing from him today about the inspiration behind the book and the topics therein. So without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce Mr. Abdulhakim Idris.
Thank you, Julie. First of all, I will thank Ambassador Brimberg for his support on Uyghur cause relentlessly. And I want to thank brother and Ustaz, Mr. Nahat Awad. Your support for us, very important. And inshallah, we will work together to end this genocide. And I want to especially thank for my president, my brother, my friend, Tulkun Isa. It is so honor for me to work with him. He is the only one legitimate leader for the Uyghur people. He was the student leader in Urumqi. He sat in front of the Chinese communist officials. He advocated for Uyghur people. And inshallah, we will work together and bring this atrocity to end and go to home together and live in peace, inshallah. I want to thank Victim of Communism Memorial Foundation and the Campaign for Uyghurs for organizing this event. As a distinguished guest before me stated, a genocide is taking place in East Turkestan, and the whole world is watching. Writing my book, my goal was to deliver a sober warning. Not only are millions of people facing a grave threat to their very existence, but as the future of the free world is at stake. The free world will see the danger posed by the CCP better only when the factories are closed, their people are unemployed, when the number of the people expelled from their media for writing an article opposed to China increases. When the freedom of speech of people begins to disappear, the CCP has used propaganda and diplomacy to hide the Uyghur genocide. The denialists claiming that what's happening in East Turkestan does not meet the standards for the genocide. According to the UN Convention on the Prevention of Genocide, just one of the 5 conditions must be met in order for it to qualify as a genocide. The situation of the Uyghurs met all 5s. Today, Uyghurs are sent to concentration camps by the millions. Uyghur family and the life order are deliberately disrupted and replaced by Han Chinese culture. Uyghur men and the women are forced to slave labor. More than 900,000 Uyghur children are abducted, and Uyghur women are being forced to sterilization and the forced abortions. How we got to this moment and what we must do to escape it is the subject of my book. I tried to gather hundreds of years of history on just a few hundred pages. My hope for this book is that each person who reads it finds with its pages a glimpse into the world from Uyghurs, expose the Chinese regime's control on those Islamic countries, and shed light on details of the Islamic world silence about the Uyghur genocide and its transformation into China's colony. With our unique Uyghur perspective gained from living through Chinese colonization and experiencing their brutality, we can accurately warn against the dangers of the CCP. Beijing used its despotic power to determine what is wrong and right. They control our past, our present, our future. They try to choose how long we live and when we die. If the world wants to know what the world looked like under Chinese domination, they can find it right now in East Turkestan. Immediately following the 1949 invasion, Beijing began a policy of assimilation that aimed to dilute the population of the Uyghurs by moving Han Chinese to the interregion. The CCP understand that the presence of the unified cultural ethnic group presents a significant threat to their expansion of power, and thus such it must be destroyed. While facing demographic threats, Uyghurs have also faced near persistent threat to their civil liberties. During the Flower Campaign of 1956, for example, criticism of political parties was first encouraged and then criminalized. Students, teachers, and intellectuals were all targeted as enemies of the state, and the thousands were sent to labor camps, planting the seeds for this coming genocide. This pattern continued through the Great Leap Forward and followed by the Cultural Revolution, which created an environment of persecution that killed millions and destroyed entire villages. Islam as a faith was targeted. Places of worship were destroyed. The extent of this destruction was extraordinary, and over 90% of mosques were demolished. The city of Kashgar, which had once been home to 107 mosques, was left with just 2. There was a period during the 1980s when the CCP regime seemingly tolerated the Uyghur people. This period began in 1979 when the Soviet Union invited East Turkestan's neighbor, Afghanistan. While the USSR was backing Vietnam in a war against China, China stuck between two fronts and had to temporarily tolerate the Uyghurs to study their own language and publish Uyghur books, build mosques, and take part in cultural studies. Even allowed Uyghurs movement in the mid-80s to keep them happy and avoid influence of the USSR and the Uyghurs. However, this so-called golden period gradually disappeared with the withdrawal of the Soviet Union from Afghanistan in 1989. The Tiananmen massacre that took place that same year showed the Chinese Communist Party was never in favor of human rights and democracy. Currently, as we can see, that the international public cannot take a firm stance against extermination attempts and the genocide of the people of East Turkestan through its ongoing trade and economic deals with China. The silence of the Muslim majority countries and its transformation into a satellite of the Beijing regime is truly shameful. The Chinese Communist parties want to bring the world under its despotic regime. For this purpose, it has been developing systematic and sophisticated projects. Every year, thousands of Chinese have been educated abroad, especially in technology and industry. Likewise, before the CCP took power, many intellectuals, businessmen, scientists, and the capital fled to the surrounding countries before the establishment of the PRC in October 1949. However, after the 1980s, they returned to China with promises of immunity. After Chinese admission of the World Trade Organization in 2000, it started to apply the free market economy system more effectively. And in a short time, it became the factory of the world with cheap labor. As a result of these important steps, the giant factory that produced counterfeit goods for a period turned into a country that produced its own aircrafts, missiles, internet, and electric cars. While this new order has been built, the universal values of the free world, such as respect of human rights and the development of new nations, have been ignored. This regime is a menace that will surround the world, starting with Central Asian countries and the Muslim states. Today, Chinese regime has corrupt elites, influential people, and the bribed rulers. They're controlling the media in Islamic countries. These countries are forced to hide their investment deals with China from their own population. The Chinese regime is talking about not interfering with the internal matters in those countries. But in reality, they are given the orders. For example, those Islamic countries historically had strong bonds with the Uyghur Muslims, but are following Chinese orders to stand by their side on the UN Human Rights Council. Beijing is using its economic leverage to create diplomatic advantage, using political power for security and the military purpose. The CCP has taken over most Islamic countries. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, while claiming to help the world, China hides its crimes with propaganda. The most visible and striking of their deception is the Belt and Road Initiative. The BRI announced by Xi Jinping in 2013 is marketed to the world with promise to bring equal development. But the developments that have emerged so far show that is untrue. There is only one winner in this economic welfare program, the Chinese Communist regime. Mahathir Mohamad, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, has summed these concepts up very well in a PBS Frontline documentary. To put in briefly, in an infrastructure project within the scope of BRI, the company that won the tender came from China. The company that will build the construction is from China. The materials to be used in construction are from China. And even the people who will work on the project come from China. Malaysian citizens lost the opportunity to earn money and support their families. For this reason, Mahathir conveyed that he did not want his country to be exploited again. You can look at the Pakistan to understand what happened to those who accept this colonial order. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has admitted that the future of his country's economy now depends on China. The Chinese have the right to speak in the giant private economic zone established in Suez Canal, which is the most important trade crossing point in the world. Also, these economic regions are only investment on the surface. They have actually turned into bases for Chinese communist regime to control the world economically. Under the name of BRI or through other investment, the Beijing government also export its own repressive regime. The first target of this regime export is the Central Asian and Islamic countries. Where is the significant part of their governments are authoritarian. The Chinese communist regime turns the rulers of authoritarian regime into satellite rulers for Beijing. These rulers are making billions at the cost of their own Muslim people. While Chinese communist regime waging an open war against the religion of Islam, calling religion is the opium and the mental disease, banning the daily prayers of Muslims, banning traditional Muslim names, and attempting to rewrite the Holy Quran. In this war of extinction initiated by the communist regime against believers, Muslim leaders chose to forget their faith and side with Xi Jinping. These who not to believe in the lies of CCP are targeted through Beijing and its extensions. The academics and scholars are immediately dismissed from their universities and forbidden from teaching at another university. If they are company manager or companies that they trade with directly or indirectly, apply an embargo. If they are journalists, the media, they work to terminate them for fear of decreasing advertisement revenues. A person working in the state can be dismissed immediately. The reason why the new colonial policies of Chinese communist regime are being effectively in the Islamic world is as due to the chaotic order that Muslim countries have passed through for the decades, to the wars and the tension in Middle East and Afghanistan for years, the breakdown of the relations between the people and the rulers in the event that started with the Arab Spring, and the Chinese regime's relentless effort to spreading disinformation. Muslim majority countries have been exploited easily, and the authoritarian leaders have been drawn into China's orbit. The plight of religious leaders and scholars, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, are deplorable. They cannot see that what is happening in East Turkestan today will emerge in Pakistan, in every Muslim majority country. The people in the Muslim world must walk to this reality that now a threat will from the East. The crisis at the hand is deeply personal to me. 4 years ago, almost exactly, I had what might be my last conversation with my mother. My brother has been sentenced to over 20 years in one of the camps. My sister have vanished as well. The door to my family's home has been sealed shut, I'm told. This caused me a pain that struck me deep in my soul and knows no end. I know that I shall embrace my mother and my family once more, whether that be in this the next life or this one is not up to me alone. It is up to us. It is up to humanity, to the world. We must ask ourselves, what will we do on behalf of those who have been made incapable of acting? What will we say on behalf of those who cannot speak? This book is fundamentally a call to action and a plea for help. It's written on behalf of so many of my people who cannot share their stories at this moment. My hope is that within its pages, I capture even a fraction of their lives. Their stories are worth telling, and they deserve to be heard. I am eternally grateful for the opportunity to tell them. The first condition of standing against the danger posed by this cruel and authoritarian order is to protect East Turkestan. The Muslim world and the Western country must stand by Uyghur people, who have resisted the tyrannical regime with their history, culture, religious belief for over 70 years. Think tanks, academic institutes, and human rights organizations must research and learn about the Uyghurs and this genocide. East Turkestan has long been the gateway to the West for China, and with its resource and location. If this gate is destroyed, then China will know it can do whatever it desires, and it will be too late for the rest of the world. Thank you for your time and your support. Together, I believe that we will see this stopped and justice brought to those who are responsible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abdulhakim, for sharing those very powerful remarks and really framing this conversation. I think that casts a wonderful vision for why this issue should continue to be highlighted, and hopefully gives people a lot of intrigue building up to the book and the important topics raised therein. We'd like to take this time to transition into some question and answer. We've had some wonderful questions come in to the chat while our panelists have been speaking and sharing their insights. So I will direct those to panelists as appropriate, and we have a few general ones as well that our panelists can answer as they feel comfortable. I would remind our speakers if they can try to keep their answers to 1 to 2 minutes, just so that we can get to as many of these wonderful questions as possible. One question I saw that has come in, which is a really wonderful question, says that the panelists drew the connection between the economic benefits of the Belt and Road Initiative and the hesitancy of many Eurasian politicians to shine a light on the Uyghur genocide. how do you think these nations would respond if the United States sanctioned the BRI trade routes running through Xinjiang? Could such sanctions be effective in pulling Eurasian governments away from the BRI? And I will leave that open to whichever panelist feels comfortable answering that wonderful question. Perhaps we can start with,
I'm
yeah, go
happy
ahead,
just to jump,
Ambassador.
but could you just rephrase part of it? Is it about sanctioning BRI economic activity that has a tie to Xinjiang, or all BRI
Yes.
activity?
The question is phrased BRI trade routes running through Xinjiang. So effectively BRI trade that has ties to Xinjiang, yes.
Well, I mean, I'll just start, and this is, this is my personal opinion. I previously was working for the government, but not anymore. But I mean, I think those types of ever increasing elements and sanctions or restrictions and limitations on economic activity tied to Xinjiang, I think will increase over time. And I think those impacts will have impacts not only on behavior by U.S. consumers, which I think is really important to raise awareness and about. I know several of my panelists already talked about this, but also on other countries, including BRI countries. So I think that's going to be an important tool that the U.S. will use from a policymaking perspective going forward. I also think this is a slightly different topic, but I'll just share that the labor practices that China is engaged in many of these BRI countries do not comport with normal standard labor law, labor protections. One of my issues when I was in Geneva under my mandate is the International Labor Organization. It is an important UN body based in Geneva that is a convention and treaty-based body around providing labor protections. China has, there is a case going through ILO today vis-a-vis China and China's domestic labor abuse. But a question that I was in discussion with lots of other diplomats about was whether or not any of China's abusive labor practices in other BRI countries would be brought forward to the ILO as cases. So I think that's an important space for us to watch and work on as we become aware of labor abuses in other countries. And this will be complicated because what it will likely look like are the failure of another BRI country to protect its own citizens and businesses or labor organizations in their own country from unfair or unethical Chinese labor practices happening in that country. And what we need to do is work with those groups and help them bring cases in effect against their own country, but really about the violations by the Chinese through the ILO process. So I think that's another area where we should be looking at using the ILO and other UN multilateral fora to really present this core human rights challenge, particularly when we're looking at the impact on BRI countries.
Fantastic, very insightful. Thank you so much, Ambassador Brimberg. We did have a question that came in for Nihad. This question is asking, as China tries to wipe out the Uyghurs, perhaps it's because even China knows that East Turkestan was occupied and eventually may be freed. So how is this something that we could bring, highlighting this messaging into the United States political spectrum? Is that something that should be pursued? Kind of a twofold question. Nihad, you're on mute.
Thank you. We take a lead by the national Uyghur organizations and the international Uyghur organizations on how they address the issue. Definitely our focus in the US is really to pressure our government to adopt the necessary resolutions now in the House to pass a bill that we believe is very crucial to send a message to China. If that bill passes, it will go to the Senate and will be adopted. We have spoken already to the Biden administration, even when Joe Biden was running for office back last October, and we raised the issue of the Uyghur matter with his campaign, And now we see that the Secretary of State is reflecting those sentiments. And we're I don't say we're content, but I think we see that this administration is on the right track to put the necessary pressure on China. In terms of the territorial issue there, I'm not an expert on it, so I will just defer to my brothers and sisters from the Uyghur community to tell us how they feel. As, you know, exactly when someone asks someone else about how do they feel about, for example, what the Palestinians want from the resolution between the Israeli and Palestinians, they will always defer to the Palestinian movement and leaders, how they would like, and they take lead from there. But definitely we are for the liberation of the Uyghur Muslims. But the first and most important thing is really to lift this brutal genocidal campaign against them, to let them breathe, to let them practice their freedom to express themselves, as my distinguished speakers already say. Basic human rights are missing. Let these people breathe. Let them live a basic human life that other people are living. Then I think the bigger issues definitely can be discussed. Right now, the Uyghur Muslims are in concentration camps. They don't have their freedoms. Let them get their freedom, and I believe the other political issues definitely can be considered and worked on. But right now, the priority is freedom for the Uyghur people.
Thank you so much. We have a question that has come in, and Dolkin, perhaps you can answer this, from an individual that lives in Italy, a country which is part of the BRI and works in media. So this person says, I'm very vocal on the BRI issue, but of course, national and international politics dwarf me. Are there any practical tips, Dolkin, from yourself or anyone else who'd like to chime in from the panelists on the best way to call for general attention on the BRI issue, particular to Italy?
Well, Belt Road Initiative actually, and my personal view, it is China now is the Belt Road Initiative just benefit whole the regional and the whole neighboring country. No more than 80 country really involved this project. Actually, my view, Belt Road Initiative of the Xi Jinping's project, territorial expanded project. Today is the 21st century. You cannot use the military power. You cannot occupy one country. If you occupy, you have to leave soon, a couple of years or period of some time. But today, China use its economic power and expanded its territorial expanding aim. We have seen China uses this Belt Road Initiative, give a loan to neighboring country, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. But this country is very corrupted. They cannot pay back this loan. Now Chinese government said, don't worry, you don't pay them back this credit, just you can, it gives us your territory. We have witnesses. Tajikistan already and they give more than 100,000 square kilometer territory to China, and the same thing was happening in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. But 2018 mass demonstration was happening. Then and with the reaction for the Kazakhstan people, then stopped it. And now is Pakistan and the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, one of the important part of this project. This 3,800 kilometer way from Kashgar, start from Kashgar to the Gwarda, $46 billion project. But now China and now is Pakistan government or the Pakistan people also understand this project not benefit at all for them, because so many unemployed and in the Pakistan, but Chinese government and gives us money, but bring all employer, workers, and everything from China, and there is no benefit at all for the Pakistani people. And besides this, Chinese government saying so-called protected its property and its employer. That's why, and now it's settled down some security force, even military. Gilgit Pakistan, more than 12,000 and the Chinese military already Pakistan territory. So this is just example. Now it's Italy is the one of the part of this Belt Road Initiative, but I don't think so. After this pandemic, COVID, then in the genocide was happening for the Uyghurs today, and the last EU sanction, and the Italian was a part of this sanction. 27 countries signed and joined this sanction Chinese government. No, and I believe in the Italian government. Italian is the same position is the future, because no is the most of some world really recognize true face of the Chinese government, Chinese Communist Party. But still some country continue believe the Chinese as liars. Well, I'm not geopolitic. I'm just activist. Maybe this is the another some researchers and the geopolitical expert. Maybe Marco Respinti, he can good answer because he's from Italy. Yes, maybe Marco can tell us what is the positions of Italy for this. Maybe more better. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dolken. Yeah, actually, we've had several questions come in kind of along the similar lines. So for any of our panelists that might like to add to this or make any remarks about what individuals can do to push back on these pro-BRI pushes that are happening in their respective countries, how they can use social media or on a personal level to counter what is happening, and with the Uyghur genocide as well. So I'd like to open it up if anybody has any practical tips or pointers for our audience today about how they personally can be involved in countering those narratives in their respective countries. And actually, I'll transition by him asking Mr. Abdulhakim Idris a question that I think may actually help with answering some of that, which is, would you mind telling us about writing the book and what your obligation, your motivation that you felt in terms of warning Muslim countries and expanding this beyond just the Uyghur issue? What was some of the motivation for that? Hakim, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us.
Yes, as you introduced me, I was born in Khotan in East Turkestan. I went to school in Egypt in Al-Azhar, grew up there, and educated in Germany, and I know what's going on in Islamic countries. When the genocide happened in this scale in East Turkestan, many or almost all of the Islamic countries were silent. That was not so important for me, but it was important for me, the scholars, for example, from Al-Azhar, Sheikh Al-Azhar, or imams in Mecca, Medina, or Iran, for example, if somebody came out in the social media and they say, I will burn Quran, and the Iranian leader Khomeini came out and they give fatwa to kill him. A CCP burning the Quran in East Turkestan, and the Iranian leader sitting with the Xi Jinping together and drinking tea. And that was, for me, very painful. So, and then I have the obligation to warn my fellow Muslim and human being what's the CCP's aim is. As a Uyghur, as a East Turkestani, we know what they look like under Chinese colonization. We have this experience. Over 135 years, we are under Chinese colony right now. And over 70 years, I am the Chinese CCP's colony. And I saw obligation for me, despite I have to work on my own family issue, my people issue, to warn my fellow Muslim and to tell them the danger is coming. Today is in East Turkestan. When East Turkestan is done, it will come to Central Asia. And it's already in Pakistan and Bangladesh. You can see in Myanmar, Indonesia. And what's happening right now in Egypt, they're building trade regional places in Africa. And lastly, they had last month to trade the deal with the Iran, almost $400 billion worth. And China putting on those Islamic countries with Huawei, ZTE, all server. For example, if a professor in Istanbul at the university write an essay or something, the Chinese Communist Party will get that. That's the wisdom. They know who what think what, where, who. And they manipulating them, bribing them, and taking them over. This colonization is not like a before, coming with the sword on the horse or with the tank or the rocket or missiles. This is coming with smile in the face and the hand with money in the bag, and the coming in, never going out. That's what's happened to the Uyghur people in East Turkestan, and I saw my obligation to inform my fellow Muslim brother and sister and humanity from the Chinese threat. And the China will take the whole world. Before China will take the Western country, they will take the Muslim country. There's a front line right now. And the media in an Islamic country, almost 100% controlled by the government, and the government controlled by the rulers or by the military. And the Chinese investing a lot of money. For example, maybe Ustaz Nihat knows, in Misr, there's a newspaper, big Al-Akhbar, Akhbar al-Yawm. There is a section every day, news from China. And they don't talk about the Uyghur issue. That's the reality. And before we telling the Muslims doesn't stand up with the Uyghur people, we have to educate them. How can we go in the Islamic country? We can go to Islamic country with the help like a brother Nihat in the Muslim population in the West, in the US, in Europe, in everywhere. But those people, we can educate Muslim nations. If the Muslim nation know what's coming to China from the China, they will stand up. I'm sure about that. That was my purpose to write this book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hakim. We only have a couple minutes left, so I did want to open it up to all of our panelists who might like to make remarks along the same lines about what can we do? What are some things that we would ask those listening today to do to actively engage on combating these issues?
So I'll just be very brief with my closing thoughts on that point. I think there's a lot we can do. And I think we've already touched on several of those elements. So one, as individual consumers, we should all be aware and make sure through social media, through our friends and all of our, family connections, that we make people aware that, we're all putting our money where we think it's doing good in terms of the products and services that we buy. I know for me in my personal life in the last couple of years, it's been an eye-opening experience where we've substantially changed my own family's purchasing habits. And I think that's something all of us can do and can share with lots of people. Two other points, when I say we, and I'm thinking mostly in my experience from a US perspective, I think we need to put pressure on companies to make sure that they are disclosing their supply chains, and we know if, to what degree, if all possible, whether or not forced or slave labor is being used. And that's a huge obligation that companies have to make sure that they're being transparent with their consumers. So we should demand that. And I also think with the upcoming Olympics next year, this is going to be a huge global challenge. It cannot be allowed to go forward in the context where it's used as a propaganda tool to suggest that, from a human rights perspective, everything's fine going on in China, when it is certainly not. So this is an ongoing discussion that we need to be having right now to understand what are the next steps and how do we use this as a catalytic moment to really force, our own and governments around the world to address this issue and take it seriously. And then lastly, from what people in other countries and BRI countries can do, I know it is extremely difficult, the point that was just made about how the media organizations are frequently either owned, controlled, or heavily influenced by the governments. But the more that individuals can raise these questions in the open, in that space, it's going to be critical to getting those countries to finally feel the necessary pressure to stand up and speak the truth. So I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I learned a lot, and I hope others did as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Brimberg. Would anyone else like to add a few additional remarks to that before we close our time?
Can I add a couple of sentences, Julia?
Of course, Dolken.
Yes. So there are a lot of things can be done. First, transatlantic response to the Uyghur forced labor is necessary to ensure the European and the American company not profit from the slave labor. This is the most important things at the moment, concrete things. And just the United States and the EU should not only introduce legislation, but also should be, they have to see and the reality implementation, of course. And also EU and the US and must increase the cooperation and protect the Uyghurs, particularly Uyghur refugees, Uyghur citizens. Now as the more than 20,000 Uyghur refugees, stateless status in Turkey, some other world. So this is the one urgent case for the Uyghur now. And also, Ambassador already mentioned is Winter 2022 Beijing Olympic, and China should not have a right have such just if most of the world know 1936 Nazi regime holds Beijing Olympic. So today, same situation was happening in East Turkestan, and Olympic now is the World Uyghur Congress and different of the international organization set up coalition. We are pushing Olympic Committee should be cancelled, but Olympic Committee continue willing to do it. So country, United States and the European country athletes should be boycott. Athletes should be boycott. This is people's countries can be done. And also, and EU and the European, US and the European country corporately encourage Muslim country. Other NGOs, the World Uyghur Congress, Campaign Uyghur, some other Uyghur organization, we try a lot, but we don't have a capacity because China and use different of way and cooperate with the Muslim country. Even some Muslim countries support to the Chinese genocidal policy towards the Uyghur. So that's why we don't have anything to cooperate with the Muslim country, but United States, European country, they have a capacity. Encourage and cooperate should be warning them should not be complicity of this genocide. Yeah, this is my message. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dolken. Well, I'd like to close our time today by asking Mr. Abdulhakim Idris if he would make a final remark and just let us know where we can get a copy of the book. And thank you to each one of our panelists for taking the time to be with us today and to share their wisdom, and for each of our attendees for your interest and attention to this very important topic. So, Mr. Idris.
Yes, thank you for giving me this opportunity. You can have it in Amazon as a hardcover copy or Kindle version. And please give your honest response on the Amazon. Maybe it will help me with the stars. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Well, this recording will be made available on the Campaign for Uyghurs YouTube channel at a later date, so you can review all of the topics discussed therein. I want to once again thank Mr. Dolken Issa, Mr. Nihad Awad, Ambassador Andrew Brimberg, and Mr. Abdulhakim Idris for taking the time to share with us today, and we look forward to our next event.